We have Carl and Charles from Drescher Malecki, who drove all the way from Buffalo to be with us tonight and give us a quick overview of 2022.
Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Carl Widmer from Drescher Malecki, and we were hired on, and this was our first year coming on as the external auditors for the county this year. Also with me tonight is Charles Stradier, the senior manager on the job. So we wanted to get before this group really to serve first as an introduction, right? First year on the job, coming in to help on the audit this year. So we wanted to make sure we got here in person and gave the update on how our first year's audit went. So we're here tonight to go over the results of our audit for the county's fiscal year ended December 31st, 2022. The majority of our audit work was conducted in July this year. We did a hybrid approach. We were on site for things that made sense to be on site. And then we also worked from Buffalo for a few weeks as well. And then used the month of September really to go back and forth with Jim and his staff in putting the final reports together. But the big news is the county's reports were issued September 29th by the September 30th deadline that the federal government imposes. So that was something that was missed in the previous year, and we were happy to, work back and forth with the staff here to make sure that we met that deadline. So we're really happy to have a successful audit this year. So tonight we put together a slideshow. We've done this at other county clients as well to provide an overview of the audit process itself, kind of why we're hired and what our responsibilities are, as well as a high-level overview of how the finances actually went for the general fund at the county for the fiscal year. So first up, the products of our audit, the financial statements. Of course, this is what you're accustomed to seeing at the end of the audit. It's going to have all the funds of the county, the balances as of December 31st, and then the revenues and the expenditures for the 12 months that are ended. Our job is to perform an audit to basically get to our professional opinion. And our opinion, that's what goes in on our letterhead in those financial statements, says whether or not we believe the numbers in these financial statements can be relied upon. Are they fairly stated? Are they accurate? So this year, our opinion was an unmodified opinion on the county's financials. Along with the county, because of your relationships with certain entities, you have what are called component units. One of them is the Soil and Water Conservation District. That's one that we're working on a qualified opinion. Those financials weren't audited. That's not part of our audit. So we're going to work with the county in subsequent years to add that on to get the full clean opinion on the county's report. In addition to the financial statements at the back of that same report, the county receives and then spends and administers federal aid. So it received just about $19 million during the fiscal year and then spent it by administering about 40 different federal programs. And because of the significance of the dollars that are brought in, you're subject to what's called a single audit. And the federal government cites if you receive more than $750,000, you need to have this special compliance audit. So that's something that we perform for the county, basically take the federal guidance, follow their guidelines, and perform the special compliance audit. This year we had to test 6 out of the 40 programs that you ran, and that was a successful clean audit, no reportable findings. Similar to the single audit on federal money, you also receive over $750,000 of New York State Department of Transportation money. Because of that, you have to do a state compliance audit. That's also something that's included in the year-end financial statement audit we did. We tested the CHIPS program, which is the majority of those funds, and that was done successfully, clean, no reportable findings. So you have some confidence in how the county is handling both federal and New York State DOT aid. Auditor communications we'll cover on the next slide. We also will be issuing a management letter. Currently, that's a work in progress with management. That doesn't carry a deadline or due date. But that's our opportunity to share any ideas or best practices we might have as far as recommendations for internal controls or how things are done in the finance office. So we're going to work through a draft of that, and that'll be issued probably in the next couple of weeks. So the auditor communications, being your external auditors, every year there are a few required communications that Charles and I need to make to this group, to the governing board. And we'll highlight a few of those tonight. Our responsibility under generally accepted auditing standards, that's what the acronym GAS is there. Our responsibility, I mentioned it before, is to perform the audit and then provide our opinion. I think oftentimes when you pick up the financial statements, they might be referred to as the auditor's financials or Drescher Malecki's report. Well, they're the county's financial statements. Just those couple pages in there that include our opinion are what we own and what we take responsibility for. The numbers in there, the footnotes in there, that's all property and responsibility of management at the county. So just like to point that out, that it is your report. Another common misconception when you hear auditors is you might associate that with fraud or searching for fraud. And while auditors can be hired to do that, the scope of our audit is to gain assurance over the dollar amounts in your financial statements. It is not designed to search for fraud. So I just want to, put that out there. There is a differentiation between your financial statement auditors and maybe like a forensic auditor that you might hire to do some sort of fraud procedures. That said, our procedures, if anything was significant or what we call material and then indicated fraud in any way, we would have a responsibility to report it to this group. Thankfully, nothing like that came to our attention this year. Significant accounting policies and estimates. The financial statements that are put together each year, there are numbers in there that have several accounting policies applied and have several estimate calculations used to come up with them at the end of the year. And why that's important and why it's a communication for your auditors is to let this group know if there were any changes to those policies or any changes to how these numbers were calculated from year to year, we would have a responsibility to inform this group so you knew that this year's financial statements can be compared to last year, or if something changed, something in the finance office changed, you should be aware of that so you know how to digest the numbers that you're seeing. There were a couple changes from last year. Being the first year, we helped identify that the CTAS, the Tobacco Asset Securitization Corporation, that's one of the component units that was missing from the report, the way it was reported in prior years. We helped the county bring that into your report, and that actually cleaned up a finding from the prior year. Another item that we saw was an overstatement of accounts payable. And what that means is the expenditures were overstated as of December 31st, 2021. A journal entry was essentially made twice. We saw that when we started looking at beginning balances, and we identified it, talked it over with management, and there's a restatement to adjust your beginning fund balance in the general fund by, I think, about $4 million. And there's a footnote special for that, footnote number 2 in the financial statements that'll describe it. But ultimately, that was something that was in the past that we identified and corrected before we moved forward with this year's audit. Independence, I mentioned before, the financial statements, we are the group that's providing the opinion that readers of your financial statements are relying on. They're looking to us to say whether these financial statements are fairly stated, that they can be relied upon. If we're going to be put in that position, it's imperative that we don't have any conflicts of interest with the county. So each year, something that we'll review is our relationships with everybody on the board, management at the county, to make sure that we don't have anything that would impair our independence or create any sort of bias. Your external auditor should be completely objective and have no skin in the game, if you will. So myself, Charles, the whole audit team, no relationships that impair the independence here. So we're in the right position to serve as your auditors. Other matters, we just let you know it was a smooth audit. We received what's called a full scope. Everything that we asked for, access, was granted to us. In the event someone at the county wanted to keep a certain box closed and not provide support that we requested, we would let you know. Luckily, it was full cooperation. We received everything that we wanted to look at for this year's audit. So if there aren't any questions on the audit, yeah, please.
You mentioned soil and water as having a qualified
Yes.
audit. Can you elaborate on that for us?
So it's very basic in that soil and water is a separate entity. And this year, their financial statements, they get brought in to the county's report as a component unit. They did not have a CPA firm audit them. So because of that, we have to put a special paragraph that says, while this report is receiving an unmodified opinion on everything there, please know that the soil and water didn't have an audit this year. So that was something that we discovered and said, this is something that we could do. So you choose or another firm.
Do they normally audit the financials every year?
That's something I'm not aware of. This was our first year, just something that, you know, we stumbled upon during the audit this year.
They do not, as far as that is I can tell.
They do not.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on our firm or the audit process itself? Gonna hand it over to Charles a little. All right.
So more on the quantitative, looking at financial trends, what we like to do is we like to split it out between expenditures and then revenues. So in this case, we're going to focus on your expenditures first. And this first chart here, it'll be included in the packet, but it's a little small here, and I'll try to summarize it. But what it does is it breaks down your functions of spending. So the categories of spending towards your residents. So it breaks out general government support, public safety services, health services, economic assistance and opportunity, employee benefit costs, and then it groups some of the smaller other costs included here. So at the end of December 31, 2022, total spending was $135.5 million. That was up $6.6 million from 2021. The largest increases to note, to discuss this evening, is the second line here, which makes reference to your general government support. It was relatively flat in 2018 through 2020, and then in 2021 and 2022, it went up just over $5 million in that 2-year span, from $14 million to $19 million, specifically related to the sales tax distribution. So where we sat back in 2020, the pandemic was declared. We were planning a budget for 2021. There was a lot of guidance out there that says that sales tax was going to fall 10, 15, it was all the way up to 20%. But all of a sudden, 2021 sales tax skyrocketed, and again in 2022, unprecedented levels continued to increase. So in receiving that sales tax, you also distribute that sales tax out to local municipalities. So that's the largest point to discuss in your expenditure spending for the year. And then the other line that I want to discuss here is the bottom line here, your other, actually went up by $5 million, which represents your transfers out that was planned towards the capital projects fund. So there was a lot of roads and bridges that were planned, that were discussed within this group. So $5 million went out of general fund to capital projects fund to pay for these projects. Other point to note is you're relatively consistent for all other functions. The top line there's a few ups and downs, and the second line from the bottom, those represents your health functions and your economic assistance and opportunity, being the red column, your social services program. So those dipped in 2020 when the pandemic was declared and some of the services stopped being provided. And then after that, in 2021, more mental health services were provided, and those correlated with increase in revenues, state and federal aid, that we'll see on the next slide. So similarly, here we're talking about the revenues. Again, this is broken down by sources. So just so you guys have it, the red portion there, the top line is your non-property tax item in your financial statements. That's your sales tax. The second line is your real property taxes. The third line is going to be your state aid. The orange line is your fourth line is the federal aid. And then you have some departmental income and other revenues near the bottom. Again, the focus here is sales tax. Sales tax receipts in 2018 were $45.3 million. In 2020, they went up to $49 million. And in 2022, they went up to $65.7 million. So from 2020, when the pandemic was declared, in 2022, we saw a $16.7 million increase in sales tax, which represents about a 17% annual increase for those 2 years. Other than that, total revenues for the year ended December 31, 2022 were $144.9 million. That was a $9.1 million increase from the prior year. Again, 5.3 of that was specifically sales tax, with the balance coming from state and federal aid to run some of those social services programs that were ramping back up since the pandemic.
And while we're on the topic of revenues, a couple slides that we've included, just as discussion points. These aren't audit conclusions, but just something to take a look at and keep an eye on trends is what representation of your total revenues is comprised of real property tax. So we're going to look at two main revenue sources. You have real property tax, which is presented on this slide. For 2022, 24% of your total revenues represent real property taxes. That's a decrease from prior years. Probably not a surprise when you look at the significance of how much sales taxes come in. And then you roll through to the next slide, please. You take a look at the same proportion, but let's look at sales tax as a percentage of total revenues. So real property tax is 24% in 2022. Sales tax represented 32%. And you can see that's an increase from the prior years. So this is something that we like to point out. You can draw whatever conclusions you want, but the idea is real property taxes are a revenue source that you can control. Sales tax, volatile. You know, we are subject to whatever state hands down, people's spending activity and habits. So during budget time, you know, this is one of those fine lines that you got to walk on, being conservative with how you budget for sales tax. And you don't want to become too reliant on it that you back off on a real property tax. That it would be real difficult if you backed off on real property tax in 1 year and then had a tough sales tax year and had to balance your next year's budget with a big 10, 15% real property tax increase. So that's what you want to avoid. So these slides, we like to just keep an eye on over several years of data to see how you're trending and how quote unquote reliant you are on each of those two big revenue sources.
So I talked about expenditures, we talked about revenues. And so here we're going to talk more of the bottom line, the impact of the net change between both revenues and expenditures. So this year, if we go back to the previous chart, we don't have to here, but the difference between revenues and expenditures for 2022 was just over $10 million. So how does that $10 million get allocated? Well, the first chart here, we look at unassigned fund balance, and we look at a percentage to kind of match you up with what your fund balance policy is, which is to endeavor to maintain about 2 months worth of operating expenditures, which puts you at 16.7% roughly of your spending. So in this case, this is what we compare, and we go back 5 years, and with the last couple of years of unanticipated increases in sales tax and state and federal aid, the county benefited from excess revenue to get to the levels of fund balance that's in your policy. So in 2021, you were right at that 2 months worth, 17%. And now in 2022, you're still very fiscally stable at $21.6 million, which is still under 5% above that policy, which doesn't state a max. So you have that kind of buffer, which in times of unpredictability, which with times of costs upcoming in the future, whether it's related to retirement costs, which is on a year lag, which has been good last year with the rates, retirement contributions are going to go up, with energy costs going up, with some of the inflationary costs that are happening. It's always safe to have a little more than that 2%, or I'm sorry, that 2 months worth of operating expenditure. So we get to audit a lot of municipalities, a lot of counties in New York State. A lot of them have policy that establish ranges where they'll strive to maintain 2 months worth, which is a government finance best practice. But after that, they'll establish a range of plus or minus 10%, for example, and say, if we go under 5%, we're going to go into action to see how we replenish it. Or if we go above 26%, we're gonna establish actions to get back down to our desired level of 2 months worth. So in this case, this is where you stand. Unassigned fund balance is at 21.6%. It represents $29.3 million. On the next slide, it breaks out the other components of fund balance. So you don't just have your unassigned fund balance, you also have reserves and assigned fund balance. So in this case, the remainder of the increase in fund balance went to increase your tax stabilization reserve by about $2.3 million. And you were able to assign more funds to appropriate in your 2023 budget at the tune of $2.7 million. And you had another $1.3 million additions in assigning funds for future capital projects. And a portion of that as well, $500,000, is some of the opioid funds that were received that are required to be restricted fund balance in this case. So your total fund balance here on this chart at the end of December 31, 2022, at the bottom there is $41.9 million. That's an increase of about $14 million from the prior year. And then on the last slide here, we talked about observations, what we've encompassed. The first positive is when we look at last year's financial statement to start building this year's financial statement. There's two findings, significant deficiencies that were reported in last year's financial statements that are no longer reported this year. And those had to do with audit preparedness, significant journal entries that auditors had to do, and some of the compilation of the schedule of federal awards that was not as complete as it could have been. And so in this case, when we came in this year, the controller's office definitely had the skills, knowledge, and expertise to get back on the right track. There were a lot fewer journal entries this year in this year's audit than there were in the prior year. So those findings aren't repeated this year. Carl talked about issuing a management letter and best practices. One thing that we like to talk here as a reminder to this group is what we've seen with ARPA spending. So whereas the county was allocated $11.5 million in ARPA, we understand that there's up to $10 million can be recognized under the provision of government services. But again, I'm using this as a reminder that we are only 13 months away at this point, having all the funds committed by December 31st, 2024 and spent by December 31st, 2026. So the clock is ticking. So just as a reminder there. And then the solid waste enterprise fund, we talk about the general fund a lot in this meeting as far as budgeting is concerned. But we audit all the other funds of the county, which includes road machinery, capital projects, county road, and then your enterprise funds. And then the solid waste fund, we've noticed some of the trends over the last several years. There's been some decline in operations and cash flow from operations. The solid waste fund does levy real property tax. And so it's just a reminder to continue to have these discussions to evaluate whether it should truly be reported as its own standalone enterprise fund, which are meant to be self-sustaining with charges to users. And it's something that most counties are going through, whether it's solid waste. A lot of them have hospitals or nursing homes. Some of the enterprise fund, some of them are more of a challenge in raising those charges for services from the users. So it's always an evaluation of, should it be standalone or should it be part of the general fund? How much subsidy should we do on an annual basis? Should we start budgeting for it? So no real impact to the audit, just continue to have these discussions. Any questions?
Yes. I used to have an accounting issue with tobacco revenue and how we accounted for it year to year. We always had to do a finding on, was that changed this year? So I no longer hear it as a finding.
Yeah, there are no findings related to how the tobacco assets being reported this year.
Thank you.
Charles, just a couple of points. Just remember that fund balance of $41 million includes the ARPA money. Okay, so that's, already committed, so to speak. So, and the other one, you talked about sales tax at 65 million. That other revenue, that also includes mortgage tax as well. So that's, okay.
Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our contact information is on this last slide on purpose. If something comes up, please, everyone here, don't hesitate to reach out to Charles and myself. We'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the Board of Supervisors meeting to order. Please rise for a moment of silence, followed by a salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to request the clerk call the roll.
Madison,
Here.
Weigel.
Here.
Ooms,
Here.
Simmons,
Here.
Stacks,
Here.
Adams. Here. Miller, Mettler.
Here.
Collins.
Here.
Riley.
Here.
Eldridge. Here. Helsley.
Here.
Person.
Here.
Livonia.
Here.
Cousin. Here. Mia.
Yeah.
Sneeder.
Here.
Mussman. Solera.
Here.
Bezzy.
Here.
Colton. Here. Morano.
Here.
Not.
Here.
Skoda.
Present.
3/4/61 present, 74 absent. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I need a motion to pay the bills, accept the treasurer's report, and file the minutes within the clerk's office.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. I'd like to have Supervisor Livonia come up and recognize Sheriff's Week.
Chairman's proclamation declaring the week of September, I know it's late, but September 17th through September 23rd, 2023, as Sheriff's Week in Columbia County. Whereas the Office of the Sheriff has been an integral part of the criminal justice system in New York State and in Columbia County throughout our history, having been established in the state's first constitution in 1777 and continued in every succeeding constitution, and having been one of the original constitutional offices guaranteed to the people upon the founding of our county. And whereas despite changes in its function, status, and powers during its long history, the Office of Sheriff has maintained a continuous existence, preserved its distinguishing heritage, and continued to be an essential component of our criminal justice community. And whereas the Office of Sheriff has evolved into a modern, professional, full-service law enforcement agency manned by fully trained police officers, using state-of-the-art technology and applying the latest and most advanced theories and practices in the criminal justice field. And whereas the Office of Sheriff is unique in the community, and the duties of the office go far beyond the traditional role of keeper of the peace and extend into many facets of public service, including maintaining the county jail, providing security in our courts, dispatching emergency services, and serving and executing civil process for our courts. And whereas as constitutionally empowered office directly responsible to the people, the ancient Office of Sheriff remains even today responsive and accountable to the public it serves. And whereas it is fitting to celebrate the historical contributions of the Office of Sheriff and the significant role that the sheriffs play in our modern criminal justice system. Now therefore be it resolved, Columbia County Board of Supervisors do recognize the important services provided to the citizens of this county by Sheriff Donald J. Kraft and the members of the Sheriff's Office, and do hereby proclaim September 17th to September 23rd, 2023 to be Sheriff's Week in Columbia County. Given under my hand in the Privy Seal of the County of Columbia at the Supervisor's Chambers in Hudson, New York, this 11th day of October, 2023. Matt B. Morrell, Chairman, Columbia Board of Supervisors.
Thank you, Supervisor Livonia. Next, I would like Supervisor Basson to come up and read a proclamation regarding Veterans Small Business Week.
Chairman's proclamation, October 30th, 2023 through November 3rd, 2023 as Veterans Small Business Week in Columbia County. Whereas Columbia County recognizes and celebrates service member, veteran, National Guard, and reserve member and military spouse entrepreneurs that keep our local, regional, state, and national economy growing. Stronger and observes October 30th through November 3rd, 2023 as Veterans Small Business Week. And whereas veteran-owned businesses are a critical pillar of our economy through entrepreneurship and business ownership, veterans continue their service by not only contributing to the economy, but also by creating economic opportunities for other Americans. And whereas the county works collaboratively with the Columbia Economic Development Corporation, Columbia County Chamber of Commerce, cities, towns, and other organizations to forward the mission of helping our businesses grow and create new jobs within Columbia County. And whereas the President of the United States has proclaimed National Veterans Small Business Week every year since 2014 to highlight programs and services available to entrepreneurs through the U.S. Small Business Administration and other government entities. And whereas Columbia County supports and joins in this national effort to help America's small businesses owned by veterans do what they do best, grow their business, create jobs, and ensure that our communities remain as vibrant tomorrow as they are today. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, Matt B. Morrell, Chairman of the Columbia County Board of Supervisors, on behalf of the citizens of Columbia County, hereby proclaim October 30th, 2023 through November 3rd, 2023 as Veterans Small Business Week in Columbia County. Given under my hand and the privy seal of the County of Columbia at the Supervisors Chambers in Hudson, New York, this 11th day of October, 2023, signed by Matt B. Morrell, Chairman, Columbia County Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. I see that Jerry Flaherty is in the back. Gary, you wanna? Why don't you accept that? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I'd like to request the clerk read the resolutions.
Resolution 362 of 2023 to 374 of 2023 by Supervisor Housley.
Mr. Chairman, I offer these resolutions for adoption.
Second motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried.
Resolution 375 of 2023 to 391 of 2023 by Supervisor Owens.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask for a roll call vote on number 389 and 390, please.
Chairman, I'll second these.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. So 389 and 390 roll call votes.
Yes, please. And I would request that we have a chance to be heard before the vote is called on both the resolutions so that our colleagues can engage in a discussion before we take the vote.
We can go through the vote, and you can speak as it gets to your name.
My request, if possible, like we've done in the past, is that once I get called, I'm fairly down on the roll, and then my argument isn't heard by my colleague. And I would like to, if possible, I know myself and some of my caucus members would like to be heard ahead of voting. Whether it affects other colleagues' votes or not is up to our colleagues, but I would like the opportunity to make these arguments ahead of the vote being involved.
Okay. So you want to go?
Okay. So I assume we're doing 389 first?
Yes, we are.
So I was really excited about the purchase of 11 Warren Street. I am still excited at the potential there. But my vote was based on an understanding that I am now realizing is a misunderstanding, that the active youth group that is currently there that services underprivileged youth in both the city of Hudson and surrounding communities would not be displaced by this purchase. I am now coming to understand that they are being asked by their current landlords to be out by the end of November, which my understanding of the Hudson real estate market is just an unrealistic timeline to find a new location. And so moving forward with this resolution, which moves the money where it needs to be to ultimately close on the sale, is displacing this youth group. And I understand that legally the county has no obligation to find them a new home. I understand that they have a month-to-month lease. I understand all of those things. But I also understand that there is a huge amount of youth, our most at-risk youth, who go there regularly and find solace there. They have home lives that might not be great. They have a community. When they came to our caucus and spoke, my heart was moved and I felt tears at how wonderful this programming was for these youth. And I just feel like there's a solution that can be a win-win solution. I feel like we could give them until the end of January, or like Bard, give them till the end of May. Work hard to find them a new location and still move forward with this wonderful, exciting program of 11 Warren Street becoming county offices without this youth group being displaced. And whether officially it's the county or Galvin displacing them, I don't think that matters. I think that we have a power here and we have a responsibility to do the right thing. And I don't think it's an either or. I think there is a path forward that allows us to do all of it. And I'm asking that my colleagues join me in making sure that we're doing the right thing before we do this very last resolution. We voted to close, authorize the attorney to close on it. Again, I and many of my colleagues had a false understanding at that point that we were only moving forward with the commitment that we were going to help find a new home for this youth group. And this is the last resolution where we can say, wait, let's pause for a minute. Let's make sure we're doing this in a way where we feel good at night about ourselves. And these youth, you know, if they were to come to me and say, why did you do that to us? I don't care the legality. I don't care that it's actually Galvin displacing them. It's not right. And if there was no solution forward where everything could happen the way that it needed to happen, then we'd have to make a hard decision. But I don't think that's true. I think there's a path forward where we can make sure that we get what we need and the youth of Hudson get what they need. So I'm asking you to vote no on 389 and hold it off until we can do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor Chimides?
Yeah, thank you, Distria. I just want to echo those words. There were two pieces that I was excited about in moving forward on 11 Warren Street. One is having a public hearing early on in the process so the community can have a chance to give their feedback, so they could feel like they're part of it, and then we could be able to respond to the community feedback. And the second piece was around the services that are currently in that building. Distria talked about sort of how important it is for the lives of the people in that service. If we just give them a 2-month runway, there's no way they can find an alternative location. It's just not feasible. I was under the impression that the tenants were going to be there until May. That would give them several months to be able to find another space. So Distria talked about sort of why it's important for the people who are in it, but I actually want to talk about why it's important for the entire county. Is that this is a program that's run by an agency that we contract with on many fronts. They provide really critical prevention services to make sure that people are on the right path. And they also provide mental health services and it's so important that we help out our young people, not just for their own lives, but for the entire community. Is that when studies after studies show that when you provide prevention services, the reason why we provide prevention services, they prevent bad things from happening. And we spend money, you know, we as a community spend money and support people in prevention. It puts people on a path of getting a good education, getting a good job, and then contributing back. If they don't have those opportunities, they're much more likely to end up in bad situations, harming themselves, harming others. We actually had a major dip in juvenile probation this year, and in part is because we've had such success in youth services. And if we take away this program that's going to harm us in other ways, then we're going to end up spending a lot more money in programs that we don't want to spend money on. So I think it's really important that we take some basic steps to provide continuity. And the steps that we can provide is that we're buying this building, we're intending on using it, but we can create a runway where they have a few extra months to find another location. But if we're not doing that, to me, it's not a good deal. And I think this is going to be, the county is going to be worse off. And so given my understanding that we're not providing this runway, I'm going to vote no.
Supervisor Cousins, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'll just echo everything that was said before myself. But when Mabadilla, as we call her in our community, came and spoke to the caucus, she re-highlighted things that I already knew about the program. Everything that Michael said is true, but also these are my constituents at 11 Warren Street. To displace them at this moment may not directly be in the hands of the county, but ultimately that will be the narrative. If we're concerned about the perception, that's what the perception will be and what will live and what we will be remembered for doing by not helping see that they can stay as long as it may take them to get a new placement. I'm asking that we push their lease and help them find somewhere to go. I understand the implications of this program not being able to live and thrive. And also on the other end of the conversation, there are people in the first ward that are just not happy about county offices being in that space to begin with. They want to see retail space. I think that youth programming is much better than retail space. I would be in support of the business aspect of what we need to do, which is rehome some of our departments. I think that this is the perfect space to do that. But I think there's a program that already lives and serves the community in that direct parameter. And that's the biggest fight, that they need to be in that location. And it's so hard to find anywhere to go in that location. And they're just asking for a little bit more time to figure it out, because this program specifically has been picked up and moved so many times that these kids don't know stability except for this iteration of their program. This is the longest that the clubhouse has existed in one place. This is the most that they've been serviced, and they've had the biggest impact in these past few years that they have in any other iteration of the clubhouse. And I think we have a responsibility to the community just like we do to our departments. And I think we can do the right thing. And I'm asking how we do try to do the right thing.
Thank you. Supervisor.
Yeah, I have a question, or maybe two questions. I'm troubled by this whole situation, and I think that our memories of what we all said to each other in executive session and or what our impressions were is maybe less important than where we are now. And the fact that I do agree with Claire that when they write about this, and they will blame it on us, even though it's not, in my view, it's not our fault. But so my question is this: would it be in our best interest and in the interest of these children, but also in the interest of the county, to push this off? I can see that the county doesn't want to inherit a building with tenants and then someday down the road have to resolve, what happens to those tenants, and then it clearly will be our fault. But is there any way that could simply be this decision tonight could be put off, or the closing could be put off for another, say, 2 months? That's my first question. And my second question is, even if we don't lengthen the runway, will the county commit to trying to help this group find some other location? My understanding is they do offer service, which is in the best interest of all of us in the county. So can the county step up and do anything about that?
I believe we already have. I've asked Commissioner Gibson as well as our youth director, Dan Graninetti, to try to assist in trying to find a spot, alternate location for the youth clubhouse.
And in order for that to happen, could we perhaps just postpone this decision tonight and give those parties the opportunity to try to help out? And then we wouldn't be in the situation perhaps 2 months from now.
This decision is only moving money around so that it's available to do a closing, but our contract said that we wouldn't close until they had resolved the building issues. So I think, as far as I understand, we don't own a building. We're not buying the building until Galvin has resolved the issues with the
But if Galvin resolves the issue by simply kicking these kids to the curb, that's going to come back as if the way the story will be written is that we did this.
So my point is, we don't have to close tomorrow.
Well, then that would be that would also satisfy my concerns.
Right. So between Galvin and the city of Hudson, I think they can find them someplace to be. So it will happen.
Yeah, it is located in the city.
Mr. Chairman, can we then resolve or clarify that our resolution tonight allows, there will be another step to approve closing?
We already approved the closing.
Right.
I have to jump in here. You're bound by contract to close.
Right.
So you'd be in breach of contract if you didn't close. The due diligence condition they didn't meet is delivering it free from any tenancies other than bar.
Understand.
So if you want to say and they sent out a 60-day notice to the tenant saying you've got 60 days and you have to leave. That's the issue you're discussing tonight. If Galvin gets the tenants out, then you're contractually bound to close because all due diligence has been satisfied.
Right. So I guess my question, Rob, is in moving the money around to allow for the closing, is there any other step before the closing?
No.
Yeah, I'm just trying to clarify Katie's question. Thank you.
Is there a way to say we want you to give them until the end of January and then we will close?
We could potentially negotiate with Galvin, but we all signed off and approved the contract, so that would be up to their whim if they agreed to do that or not. And honestly, they've expressed desire and close. So,
Supervisor Mia?
Mr. Chairman, I'm in the Hudson supervisor also. It is my area and they have first and second ward. Whatever we do, we have a duty for our children, our young. If we close now, matter, county cannot help that until May, they can stay there. We are work for the people. I'm requesting you, if not Galvin does, county can help them until May, they can stay over there. Is it possible? Our jobs only not the moving the financing the financing the office and the relocation. Our job has to help the people of our people, our young people, their future, their health. Could you please, if Galvin not doing, do that until May, that help the health of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Stats?
Can I just get clarification from Rob? You're saying once Galvin has the tenants vacated, we are contractually bound to close?
yes. We have reserved a due diligence period to do a survey, to do environmental, to do, some building review and design. And if any of those things came up bad, environmental or anything, there was asbestos and we wanted to bail, we had that time period to put them on notice. These conditions aren't met, we're not going to close. One of the last conditions was when we got the contract from their attorneys, we acknowledged that Bard had an existing lease. So we were going to take subject to Bard's lease and no other tenants. So when this issue came up, we put them on notice to say, we're not ready to close. So we're actually delaying the closing now. And we're not going to close unless and until you deliver it pursuant to the contract with only one tenant being Bard. So that's why Galvin sent out the 60-day notice to the tenant. I hope that clarifies, that's where we're at.
So our only course to actually help the youth group is to help them in this transition period in their 60 days, because one way or the other, they're getting evicted by the owner, and we're contractually bound to buy the place after this happens.
Correct.
So we need to act within the next 60 days, do what we can to help them.
Correct.
Thank you for clarification.
Okay, Supervisor Adams? I'm sorry, you had your hand up before.
You can go
Brother, go.
age before beauty.
I guess my question is whether or not we can ask, whether we can close before the 60-day period and have Galvin rescind the 60-day notice and then allow the youth club to continue after we have bought the building for a period of time, be it through January or through May. It would seem like the logistics of doing that would be fairly simple and would meet a whole bunch of needs of the kids and get the deal done on a timely basis. It just doesn't seem like that would be too complicated. But Rob, maybe you can help me understand why we couldn't just ask Galvin to rescind the 60-day notice, close without the club out of there, and then work with the club to have them migrate out by the end of January, the end of May. And Bart.
That's a decision you as a board of supervisors need to make if you're willing to take over subject to tenants.
So
If you
why,
read the newspaper article today, she did say that she'd have to be removed by force to ever leave the building. And as your legal counsel, when a tenant is blatantly saying they're not going to leave ever, do you want to become landlords? Because if you do need to take steps, then you have to go through a legal process here. So that, but I'm not saying that's not doable. I'm saying that's a decision that you as a board would need to
That's
make.
so basically what we're voting on.
yeah,
I think my question was a little different. My question was, can we
work with the current landlord to extend their runway to, let's say, January 31st, without assuming the responsibility for the tenant?
You can ask if that's what the board decides.
That seems to be-
We don't close until January or next May or whatever, which Calvin may not like.
Honestly, what you're asking to do is within the 60 days of closing, you're asking them to renegotiate the contract. We can always ask. I don't know if they'll agree to that or not.
We have a resolution. It's a roll call vote.
So can we, before we vote on this, can we consider a resolution to request that Galvin extends the runway? And can we consider buying the building without the tenant having been evicted? So that we can control the length of the runway.
Our typical process, we have a resolution, went through committee first and seconded on the floor, so we've got to put that to a vote. If you want to bring that up as another alternative after that resolution, to bring something from the floor, we take a 2/3 vote on whether it should come up and then a vote on the actual one. So that's unfortunate. We've done it before. I know it's confusing, but that's the process.
Can I ask a question? If this resolution passes, since it's just transferring the funds, can we still try to bring a resolution to the floor that we ask you to amend the contract?
Sure.
I think that makes sense, because we want the building, and we want satisfactory outcome for the youth group, and we want to get this all resolved as quickly as we can, so let's move the money and then deal with the issues at hand.
Basson,
Yes.
Weigel,
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Simmons,
Yes.
Stacks,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes, with the caveat that we do the additional resolution.
Mettler,
Yes, with the same caveat. I don't know that you're allowed on the caveat. You know that I'm gonna leave on second anyway. I know you're not. So I would vote, yes, but also express my hope that we will take the second resolution.
Collins,
I vote yes, and I thank Supervisor Bass and the other supervisors for their thoughtfulness.
Bradley,
I go yes.
Eldridge,
Yes.
Helsley,
Yes.
Kirsten,
Yes.
Livonia,
Yes.
Cousin,
No.
Mia,
No.
Chamidas,
No, I'll give the reverse caveat that if the other resolution passed, I would have.
Busman, Scalera,
Mr. Chairman, for reasons previously stated, I have been very consistent with every resolution dealing with 11 Warren Street. I abstain from this one.
Guzzi,
Yes.
Hoagland.
I'm going to vote no, similar to Michael. I would vote yes if I knew that the next resolution will pass, but the past resolutions on this, I voted yes with an understanding that something is gonna occur that is now potentially not occurring, so.
Morel,
Yes.
Nutt,
Yes.
Skoda.
Yes.
We have 31 ayes, 430 nays, and 74 abstaining.
I want to make a motion that we ask Attorney Fitzsimmons to request that Galvin rescind the 60-day notice to the tenants, the youth group, and that we move forward with the closing with the youth group tenants still in as tenants and move forward with helping them find a new location.
Christie, can we clarify that?
Yes.
I think what we were discussing previously was extending the closing to allow Calvin more time. We do not want to inherit a building with a tenant that we know won't leave. You'll be there for
I agree,
years.
but I would support delaying the.
I'm supportive of extending
The
the
other one?
closing to January 31st. If Calvin would agree to give them more time to transition tenant. I am not in favor of becoming a landlord.
Well, since it doesn't seem to have the votes on my original motion, I will withdraw that motion.
Thank
And I
you.
will make a motion from the floor to ask Attorney Fitzsimmons to request that Galvin extend the closing to the end of January and give the youth group tenants until the end of January to vacate the premises, at which point we would immediately close.
Right, so that's the motion to consider it, having the motion not gone through a committee process. We first need a 2/3 vote of the supervisors to consider that motion.
First one has a second.
Second. Can I ask the question? Will this jeopardize the contract with Galvin?
No, it would be an ask to Galvin's council and they would consider it and they would respond. They can say yes.
So
or they
you
can
can
say
say
no.
yes or no.
So if they say no, then we would still be bound by the current contract because we have approved that contract, correct?
It's a request that I think truthfully would help their PR as well. They have a list of PR.
I think you might be right.
Well, I've sent as council the first Register Star article that came out and I can plan on sending in the second that came out today, which expressed it as an issue.
If I'm their counsel, I would consider handling this in a more delicate matter. If it delays by a month or so, it's not going to make or break anybody's world.
Especially if we let them know that we're doing our best to try to resolve this matter. And as soon as it's resolved, then we come to the closing.
Or they resolve.
Right.
We should all be working together to
So
resolve.
move the review group until January 31st, or at present time, they can find someplace else to go.
Actually,
That's,
but we shouldn't put anything contingent on the youth group itself. We should say we'd like to extend the closing to January 31st.
Yes.
Well, and ask them to rescind the 60-day vacate notice to the youth group
Yes.
and extend that to the.
And just your part of your motion, I thought was that, and that we will continue efforts to try to resolve this matter by finding a suitable location. What, didn't you say that? Okay.
My motion was asking to extend the
Okay.
closing 2 months and asking them to extend the order to vacate 2 months.
Let's recap the motion.
So wait a minute, I thought you could read this, I wanna.
What I have, because it's important that I have it, I'm gonna make the ask.
That's what I like.
So I have, would you extend the closing date to January 31st or thereafter, providing them, the youth group, more time to find a relocation space? And then we will close, but not subject to any tenants other than Barb.
And letting them know that we're actively trying to find a home.
Supervisor Lagonia.
I don't support that, and I'll explain why. If we keep the closing date as it is, which is roughly the end of November, if they don't get out by the end of November, then Galvin would have to evict them. If Galvin evicts them, that's not gonna happen for at least another 30 to 60 days anyway. If we prolong the date to January, we could be into March or April. This will only expedite things, and hopefully they will find something in between. And I think that if we extend it, we're just kicking the can down the road, and I don't think it's a good idea. I do think that, I do know for a fact, because I know I speak to Bob, they're looking vigorously to find them a location. We completely support that. Dan Grandinetti is also helping to look for a location, but I don't think that everybody's understanding what the legalities of this and what a summary proceeding would bring. We're not taking the building until they're out of there. If we move it down, we're going to be months down the road. Leave it as November. If they're not out by November and he decides to do an eviction proceeding, they're still going to be in there till December or January, which is going to give them more time to get out. I just want to make sure everybody understands how that process is going to work. I think by pushing it to January, we could be February, March, April. So I will not support that
There's
resolution.
still only a couple of more months.
Possibly, but I still think we're already giving them 3 to 4 months. And the end game here is that they find a viable location, because we all want them to,
Right.
and hopefully they find it by the end of November. If not, it would be by the end of December. So I just don't think that by doing that, it's going to help anything. I think, I know how hard Bob's looking for a location, and I know how others are from the county looking. And there's already been some conversation and calls. I'm not saying there's a location by any means, but I do think it will happen. So I'm hopeful that it does. I support the youth club, but I don't think by changing the contract, we've already negotiated this contract several times. And I highly doubt, of course we can ask, and it's a democracy, that Galvin would go with that anyway, frankly. But that's just my.
I'm gonna call the vote. I'm gonna ask, Rob to reiterate what we're voting on.
It's a request to Galvin to extend the contract term till January 31st or thereafter to close, providing the youth group more time to find a relocation. And we would close thereafter, not taking subject to any other tenancy of the bar.
Rob, clarification, we have to vote first on bringing the motion.
This vote that you're making right now is a vote, should we consider that motion? Because it didn't go through our normal processes. We needed 2/3 of this motion to then consider the actual.
So this vote is just to debate and consider another motion.
Right.
Which I'm always.
Okay, all right, Basson.
Given the sensitivity of this matter and the extremely high level of public interest, I think it would be advisable for this Board of Supervisors to do the right thing and approve this resolution. So I vote yes. I think it's in our interest as well as the kids' interest to do this, and 2 months doesn't make a darn bit of difference to anything in this day and age. So I vote yes.
Weigel.
I'd like to say I disagree with Arthur. I agree with Rob in this point. You think about it, I've seen it many times through the court system that it just drags on and on and on. I understand we're all working very hard to give these people a place to go, and I think that will happen, especially with the city of Hudson looking and Bob doing it. So I'm gonna vote no.
Holmes.
I got to vote no as well. I still think the city of Hudson should be able to find some place with declining enrollment in schools and stuff like that. There's got to be a suitable location in a school somewhere or something like that.
Simmons.
I'm confident that they'll get relocated, and so my vote is no.
Staggs.
As much sympathy as I have with the youth group, I'm not willing to take the chance to jeopardize this contract we have in place for the sale of this building. I think it's a desperate space we desperately need, and to put that up to start trying to renegotiate at this time, I can't see it, so I have to vote no.
Adams.
With all due respect to my colleague, Mr. Stats, I don't think this will jeopardize the contract. It's a straight up or down vote, yes or no. And I do think that this is really, what it boils down to is if this program is evicted, there will be no place for them to go. So the lights will go off and there's no place for them to go. So I could not in any conscience vote for anything other than yes on this.
Butler.
Yes.
Collins.
Yes.
Riley.
Again, we're voting just to debate the next motion, so I'm always in favor of the debate and the resolution, where everybody's kind of voting like they've already made a decision on the next one, so I'm clarifying again, we're just voting to get to the next step, which I always in favor of, so yes, to the next step.
Eldridge.
No.
Elsley.
No.
Kirsten.
I believe this is a moral and a perception issue, so I vote yes.
Ligonia.
No.
Cousin.
Yes.
Mia.
Yes.
Chemius.
Yes.
Usman. Scalera.
Abstain.
Guzzi.
No.
Holtman.
Yes.
Morel.
No.
Not.
No.
Skoda.
Out of the respect of the ability to have this conversation and allow motions to come to the floor, I am voting yes.
Nice.
1332 ayes, 2476 nays, and 77.2 abstain. Motion does not carry.
Thank you. Next is, resolution number 390. Again, a roll call vote was requested.
Can we have somebody just state exactly what we're voting on again?
Yeah, so resolution 390 is a resolution in opposition to New York State Senate Bill S 139B and Assembly Bill 1358B that's regarding the local justice awards that was before you last month. So basically, it's a roll call vote whether you want to pass that resolution.
We're trying to support the county's, we're supporting the state in passing it, or we're asking to support a letter stating that we're against it?
A resolution stating we're against it.
Thank you for clarification.
Chairman, do we have any people from the county law committee here that can give us the pros and the cons of this resolution?
We have several justices who are here.
That might be a useful thing to hear what the justices have to say.
Gentlemen, hello, good evening, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Thomas Diaz of the town of Ankrum. I sat in the seat that Art had many, many years ago. That's, along with you. Prior to that, I was a town judge for 13 and a half years. In the interim, I was able to get on a board of the New York State Association of Judges, New York State Magistrate Association. And I'm glad to say in the last 20-something years, I've learned a lot about government in New York State. What this resolution is asking is that you support the fact that an individual who is not an attorney can still be a town judge. What the legislature wants, well, I wouldn't say what the legislature wants to do. I'm going to say what several associations have approached the legislature and said, we think it's a good idea if only attorneys were allowed to be town and village judges here in their state. And one of the things they overlook is the fact that, interestingly enough, there are a large number of locales in our state where there's not a person who's an attorney in that locale. It also surmises that an individual who is an attorney is somehow magically gifted to be a judge. And I ask you to keep in mind, there are many kinds of attorneys. When I first became a judge, I became aware of the broad range of things that judges and attorneys do. And I became aware of the fact that I could meet an attorney and I would begin asking or mentioning a legal subject, and the individual would say, oh, wait, I'm a real estate attorney. I never deal with that. Oh, okay. Or I'm a tax attorney. I never deal with that. But to be a town and village judge, you have to be familiar with the broad spectrum of laws here in New York State. And we are. And both the New York State and the New York State Magistrates Association work diligently every year to ensure our judges stay very well informed of the laws in New York State. Now, this doesn't mean to say that we think that attorneys should be disallowed from being on a bench. If the people in that town think that that individual should be the judge, so be it. But similarly, if the people in that town say, I mean, I know Joe Blow and I know Frank Pete, and I think Frank Pete's the person I want to be the judge, regardless of what their prior thing, they could be a dentist, they could be whatever, that people in that town should get to select amongst all the candidates, regardless of their professions, that's the person they want to be judged. I'm here to let you know, we on the State Board of Judges see this as a stepping stone. Many of you may not realize that in Long Island, the two counties in Long Island have what's called district courts, where there's one court for the entire county. Yes, some of the villages have courts, but they're only for traffic violations, nothing more. So if an individual has a situation in that county, they have to go to the county court, irregardless of where they live. And there's been a constant little push to get this across New York State. If you ask the people in Long Island, the counties, how they feel about it, well, those courts cost the state millions and millions of dollars to run. It's not very efficient from the user's point of view. And we think that there's a push to do that across the state, and this is just the first step. So with that said, I'd like to say you can ask us any questions, or if any of the judges would like to add anything.
Our president is here today, folks from the New York State Magistrates Association. He'd like to address you also, please.
Good evening. My name is Kenneth Owen Johnson. I'm the judge for the town of Day. Town of Day, New York is Saratoga County. I've got about 900 year-round residents. During the summer, I go over 11,000. My court, depending on time of year, can see just a few cases, or we can see a lot of cases. As Tom pointed out, there aren't attorneys in every community. This proposition was put forward by New York State Bar Association, which represents 13% of attorneys in New York State. They put it to the Senate and the Assembly, asking them to take this bill into consideration. It's called the Top 100 bill. What that means is the courts that see the 100 most busiest caseloads would have to be overseen by attorney justices. Now, before I get into that, there's approximately 1,800 town and village judges in New York State. There's about 1,200 town and village courts in New York State. Approximately 2/3 of the town and village judges in New York State are non-attorney judges. The town pointed out there's no prohibition for attorneys to run for those positions, but in those communities that don't have attorney justices, they've decided that the people who best would represent them as justices are not attorneys. This bill is kind of a stepping stone by the Bar Association. Imagine in your positions, you guys pass for your town boards, you pass local laws. Here at the county level, you guys pass county laws. If you guys are creating laws, what's to stop the Bar Association from telling you or your voters you can only elect attorneys to these positions? Because if attorneys are the only ones who can act as judges, why would it not make sense that attorneys are the only ones who could write laws? I would disagree with that notion. I would say that all of you show the sensibility, especially in your discussions and arguments today, back and forth, the civility you had, that none of you are not qualified to do your positions. And I would ask that you support the town and village judges in New York State by emphatically telling the Senate and the Assembly that you believe that local elections should be chosen by the local voters. And if those voters choose to have attorneys, they can. If they choose to not be represented by attorneys, they should be able to also. Thank you.
Now, just to close out, one last point I want to make. Like, I was president in 2006, and there's been continually a push to do this. It's gotten a lot more further this year because they got an actual bill in there. But every year, we as the New York State Magistrate Association, who are available, go and talk to them and try to make them understand that this shouldn't pass. And previous years, it kind of died on the book. It never made it to the floor. But keep in mind, the next step would be everyone in this room to have the seat that you have would have to be an attorney. Say that again. The truism is they could easily say everyone who has a seat in this room would have to be an attorney to have that seat. So there you have it.
If I can just finish up, I apologize. This is my first time speaking as the president to anyone other than our membership, so I'm a little nervous, got ahead of myself and sitting down. One of the things that I'd like to tell you guys a little bit is about training. Town and village justices, before they can sit on the bench, once they are elected as officials, if they're not attorneys, the Office of Court Administration has to put on a training course called Taking the Bench. And each judge, before they can be certified to sit on the bench, has to take this course put on by the Office of Court Administration, which oversees all judges at all levels of the state. They have to participate in this training and they have to pass exams, each module of exam, to be certified as a judge to sit on the bench. Once you are on the bench, you need to do a minimum, whether you're an attorney or non-attorney, a minimum of 12 hours of continuing judicial education and or continuing legal education every year. The Magistrates Association state mandates that you have to do that 12 hours. They offer 12 hours. You have to get tested in 6 of it every year. But for the additional 6, you can have what are called elective courses. The state offers 12 courses, 6 mandatory that are examined, and then 6 that you can take whatever you want. The Magistrates Association offers usually between 21 and 26 additional credit hours of continuing judicial or continuing legal education. We just had our annual conference in Syracuse, New York last week. Dr. Carrie O'Hara was there with us. We offered 26 credit hours of additional training, and we had over 150 judges from around New York State who came to participate in that training, both attorney and non-attorney. So the idea that a non-attorney judge is just some guy who woke up, got out of bed, and now he's using his own common sense to make judgments is not a true story. All of the judges go through a continuous amount of training each year. So thank you.
Judge, I had a question.
Sure.
Originally, we were told that when we were looking at the top 100 courts by volume, it included vehicle traffic. We got something today that said it was for criminal courts only.
So the understanding as far as we have it is that they have not decided what the rubric will be for this, deciding what makes the 100 busiest courts. It's not been decided, so it could be traffic included, it could be criminal included, it could be a combination of both, it might be one or the other. And until that point, you don't know which communities will be the busiest. There are towns in New York State that have heavy court loads because they're located on New York State Thruway. And they might process 1,000 tickets in a month, huge number of tickets. between a few different judges, a bunch of court clerks, everybody else, they might be considered one of those busiest courts when they don't really see any criminal matters. Whereas you might have a place that sees some very severe criminal matters, that is a smaller court. And this, as I said before, is kind of the inch that they're moving. They're going to keep moving that inch. First, it's going to be the top 100 courts. Then it's going to be, well, the next 500 courts. Then it's going to be every court. And for those courts that they can't do that with, they will try and move us to district courts. And the cost for district courts is millions of dollars each year. It's not cost effective for town and villages to end up in that system. So.
Just to clarify, I did reach out to our senator, Senator Hinchy, who did reach out to Senator Sean Ryan, who is the bill's sponsor. And it said that it is the number of criminal arraignments, top 100 courts, and none of the towns in Columbia County are on that list.
Okay, so that's, I appreciate that input. The Senate and the Assembly bills are slightly different. They have not yet come together on a conjoined bill for that decision to be made. So although that might be the Senate's criteria, it might not be the Assembly's. Questions?
Yeah, Judge, something as important as this, why wouldn't this be considered for a referendum item on a ballot?
So anytime it has gone in front of the larger state, it's been shot down. And this is an attempt by the Bar Association to get it changed. I think Dr. Carrie O'Hara would like to address that. But essentially, when something hasn't been able to done one direction, they say, well, let's try and do the same thing, but from a different direction. So I'll turn it over to Dr. O'Hara.
We do have, Mike, you want to go first? You're welcome to.
Would you folks like to know a day of a non-attorney town justice? I'm a businessman. I've been in business for 51 years in Columbia County. And I was asked to run as town justice for the town of Clobbery. And I took that. I observed the court at one night and I said, I can't do this. This is crazy. And the town justice at that time said, hey, listen, you got a little time, think about it. I thought about it. I went to another court. Okay, maybe I can do this. I actually asked Rob, do you think I have the guts to do this? And he said, yeah, you got the guts. My day to day, I had a business problem that I had to go to Albany. Then I accompanied Judge O'Hare and Gary Flaherty to Equine Advocates to honor a 102-year-old veteran of World War II who trained gunners on those big old guns that go on your shoulders. And she is an absolute wonderful, wonderful woman. Carrie and I were there. I didn't see anybody of you there. I didn't see anybody other of justices there. Then I had a wedding this afternoon at 2 o'clock, which I performed, which is one of my duties, which is one of the famous, wonderful, happy duties of being a town justice. And the state got involved years ago that there were some justices out in the outer counties charging money when we're not allowed to. So the state legislature got involved and they said, you can charge $0 to $300 for a wedding ceremony. Well, I've had 36 marriages, most of whom have been zero. It's just a handshake, and I hope you love each other. And today's 2 o'clock marriage was a handshake and a zero, and I hope you love each other. Then I went into my court office, my wonderful, the best court clerk in the state of New York, Brenda Weigel. This guy's, what is she? Your
my
sister-in-law. She handed me a packet. She said, have a nice afternoon, Mike. So I went home with 34 B&Ts, 4 criminal cases, and 1 taillight violation that I had to decipher this afternoon before this meeting. You don't have to pay me retirement. You don't have to pay me hospitalization. My ex-wife one time asked me, how much are you getting paid for doing that job? She said, you take 30 days, count the hours, and then divide that by the paycheck. I got $7.43 an hour. You don't know how lucky you are.
As you can see, folks, first, good afternoon. I'm the Honorable Dr. Carrie A. O'Hare. And in the state of New York, I think I'm one of 3 who can say I'm an honorable doctor. So I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you. Number one, I want to let you know this article, and he wanted to be here tonight, was written by Honorable, he's actually Rich Dallinger, but he's now retired. Let me put my glasses on, guys. The title of this is Leave New York's Local Courts Alone. He said, there's no need to change the state constitution or state law when local democracy, letting local voters decide whether an attorney or a layperson should be the town or village judge holds the same promise. In the meantime, leave New York's local voters and their chosen system of electing town and village judges alone. Richard A. Dallinger is a retired judge of the New York Court of Claims. He supervised town and village judges in 5 counties in the 7th Judicial District for 6 years before retiring in 2022. I will say this to you folks, right now you have a lot of passion here because these folks believe in what we do. We do it not for the glory or the guts or anything else. We do it for, not the money, that's for sure, but we do it because we know it's the right thing to do. We honored a vet today who's 102 years old because we call it shared values. Our judges stand for duty, honor, justice, and country. If the legislature would change the one word in there that says you must come out and do those arraignments, not you shall go out and do those arraignments, those of us who are dedicated to this, and I've been doing this for 23 years, that phone rings, I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to go out and do my job. All right, we cover for a lot of other judges, and the newer ones coming in just saying, well, we just don't have to do that. Someone else will do it. We believe in what we do. We want to preserve the right of liberty, folks. No one should ever go to jail. They won't go to, unless it's in the statute that I must put them in jail. I will not just say, fine, wait until 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock the next morning. Let them sit in jail until the district court has got somebody there. And that's what I've heard higher level judges saying. That's a good thing to do. In 2006, I was one of NYSMA's, New York State Magistrates Association. They asked me, because I was getting my doctorate at the time, would I appear in front of the New York State Judiciary Committee hearings? I did, for the Senate and the Assembly. And you're right, whoever said it in the back there, we should have referendums. We should have it out there in the public. They tried to bring this in the back door this time. In 2006, they said there were problems in your town and village courts. They put it out there for the public to respond to it. And guess what we had? We had money put at it, and we had programs put in for better education, better technology out here to help all our town and village courts do their job better. Right now, they tried to pass this in the back door. We didn't even know it was coming at us. Yes, you're absolutely correct, sir. There are no courts in Columbia County, for the one down there mentioned it, that would meet this top 100. We're not asking that whether it's an attorney or a non-attorney. We're saying we want home rule, and we don't want that to go away. Your towns and villages here, you should decide who the best person is. And we don't want that to change. That's all we're asking on this. You establish a district court, it's $1 million for every bench that you establish. And Orleans County out there, outside of Rochester, I think, out there?
Yeah.
They just decided they were going to do a district court, and it was great. They put it all together, and they sent the presentation to the Office of Court Administration, who said, that's a great idea. But by the way, we're not going to pay for it. And guess what? It died. They're still reviewing it. Why should you have to do it, folks? We're in counties right now that have very little as far as any kind of transportation. You know right now, if you try to go somewhere after 5 o'clock, forget about 7 or 8 or 9 in this county, what kind of transportation is out here? All right, our folks have a right, and the people we serve have a right to get to a court who can listen to them. That's my job, to listen, to hear all sides, not just one side and not both sides, but all sides if something is wrong. And try to come up with the best possible solution, looking so I can make an informed decision. That's all we're asking, folks. This resolution that's right now that I'm asking you, our judges are here and they've traveled pretty good distance for some of them. We just want you to approve it, to say, stop the legislature from trying to tell the towns and villages that they'll decide who the person is to be in those positions of those courts. That's what I'm asking. That's what our judges are asking. We will continue to do our job because we believe in it, what we do out here. I know your time is valuable, and I thank you for listening to us. All right, thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Gary Flaherty?
Yes, good evening. I'd like to give you the perspective of experiences I've had with our local courts and my veterans. There's literally hundreds of veterans today that I've been in court with, and I know the hours that I get called to, and I go to court. All the justices in Columbia County allow me to be with my veterans if they're appearing before a court. And without some of the personal touches that our judges have, I have veterans that would not get the treatment that they needed for post-traumatic stress and other issues. And therefore, by allowing me to get my veterans into treatment programs to literally save lives in this county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll, hold the vote.
Madison,
We're voting to support a resolution in opposition to the state proposal.
Yes.
I vote yes.
Weigel,
Yes.
Holmes.
Yes.
Simmons,
Yes.
Stats,
Yes.
Adams.
Yes, I just would like to say something for the record. I appreciate the commitment and also the passion that justices bring to their courts. But I also see the advantages of building on a knowledge and experience base. I do think the proposed legislation here for, having been admitted to the bar for 5 years is extraordinary. So I couldn't support that. But I would say that 20 years ago, our town caucus made a decision that justice candidates needed to have legal training or experience to qualify to run for justice. And that we learned from that experience that it increased our ability to source candidates, but we also learned that the public assumed that justices had legal training outside of the judicial training that they received when elected. So I do think that there is some ground here to cover, but I'm going to vote in opposition to this law for that reason. I think that there's more work to be done.
Mettler,
No.
Collins,
Yes.
Riley.
I echo Supervisor Adams in that the purpose of this particular law doesn't upset me with the complexity of the cases they present. I just worry that's the first step, and I support our local judges. I've known many lay people, including many here, who make good justices, and I'm afraid at the town level I represent, we would never be able to find enough candidates to judge.
Eldridge,
Yes.
Elsie,
As a town with one lawyer and one non-attorney, that the people of Germantown have picked, there was another candidate that was an attorney, but people decided on which two they wanted. One was a non-attorney and one was an attorney, so I vote yes for this resolution.
Person,
Yes.
Ligonia,
Yes.
Cousin,
Yes.
Mia,
Yes.
Chamidas.
Well, first, I just want to really show my appreciation to our local judges. I really appreciate the hard work that you put into your cases and for our community. And I also think that you didn't really address the key issues of the resolution at hand at New York State, talking about the 100 biggest courts. Chickamauga Town Court, 86,000 people is in that town, bigger than Columbia County. Then we're talking about like local courts. Some of these courts are quite large. I know in the city of Hudson, we have attorney judges, and I think that's what my residents want. You go back to Chickamauga, 100 criminal cases per week. So I do think that if you're looking at the biggest courts in the state, it's a different animal where I think you're gonna want, I think the residents are gonna serve better attorneys. I'm gonna vote no.
Busman. Solera.
Yes.
Guzzi.
Yes, thank you.
Bolin.
I also want to thank all of you for coming back again. I know it was because of me that you had to return because of the procedural issue last time. I, as my colleagues know, have stood against these kind of resolutions that really don't do anything other than saying, New York State, you're doing it wrong, you're messing up. I think I'm in the minority on that stance that if you want to, be involved in state legislation, then you should run for state office. Just like I wouldn't want our senator coming to us and saying, I don't like what you guys are doing. I think this is the first time that I'm aware of, at least since I've been here for 3.5 years, that we are doing that kind of, hey, New York State, you're doing it wrong, for legislation that literally does not affect a single constituent that we were elected to represent. And I think that's a very slippery slope. I don't think that we should involve ourselves in legislation that doesn't have anything to do with us. If, New York City was coming up and saying you're doing your roads wrong and here's why you need to do it this way. I think also to Supervisor Chimidi's points in the email from Senator Hinchy's office, they also made some points that these are really large municipalities that we're talking about. So they're in and near population centers, which have adequate numbers of attorneys. I realize that in towns like mine, you might not have candidates that can run for judge that are attorneys. This is not like any of our towns. These are large municipalities with no shortage of attorneys. And sitting non-attorney judges, nobody's brought this up, are grandfathered indefinitely. It's not just that they can finish the term that they're in, they can run as many times for reelection as they would like until they decide to step down from the bench. And so this legislation is not removing any non-attorney judges from the bench. And for those purposes, I am voting no.
Morel.
I just want to echo what the town justices said. I don't want the state legislature or the governor choosing who Stockport judges are. I want the people of Stockport to choose who the judge is, whether it's an attorney or a lay judge. So I vote yes.
No.
Yes.
Scoda.
To clarify some of Supervisor Holding's points, the language in this resolution at the Senate is unclear. Yes, the individual who has sponsored it is telling us that it is for criminal cases only. In the event this is for courts that handle traffic tickets, we will be affected. There are municipalities in this county that would fall in the top 100. And because of that, and because I support home rule, I will vote yes.
3374 ayes, 511.4 nays, and 0 abstains. The motion carries.
Resolution. Okay, I'd like to thank the justices for being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do any supervisors have any other business?
I do.
Sorry.
Can I make one last comment, kind of semi-related? When I was a town supervisor here, I had previously been a judge. And as you heard tonight, as a judge, I had to get all kinds of training. When I became town supervisor, he was here, and so was he. The first thing I did was I approached the Association of Towns, which I knew was a counterpart to the New York State Magistrate Association. And I remember saying to them, hello, my name is Thomas Dias. I'm a new judge. I just got on the election, and I just want to get in on the training before January 1st. And I was shocked to find out there was none. There was none required. Now, I don't know if that's still true today. I do not know if that's still true today. But I was shocked. I was like, wait, I'm going to be the town supervisor. There must be something. There's nothing. Hopefully that's changed.
Association of Towns has a training every year for newly elected officials.
They do?
Yes.
Okay. Well, back in 2007, it wasn't required. It was nothing and it wasn't required.
It's not
I was
required.
shocked to find out, if I'm gonna be responsible for $1 million of money and there's no training, it's councilman, same thing. So what I'm saying is, the same thing can happen to you. The legislature can say the same thing to you. That's why you the example. I mean, maybe some of you are attorneys, great, but the same thing can happen to you. So watch your legislature. Thank you.
And folks, as we leave, we just want to tell you, I don't care if it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning. Every one of these judges here, when that phone rings, we're going to answer it. We're going to go out and we're going to serve the people that have duly elected us. And we thank you so much for everything. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other supervisors have anything? Supervisor, Elbert.
I just really wanted to say very quickly, as a representative of the Leck family, to the Board of Supervisors and county employees and people that are here, thank you so much for the flowers, the calls, the cards, and the kind words in the loss of my mother. It was very much appreciated by my family.
We just have a correction on the vote. Sherry had done a 2/3. It's a simple majority. So it's actually 3,046 A, 489 nay. So the resolution still passes, but I just wanted it for the record that it's the simple majority.
Okay, anybody else? All right, with that, I have one appointment of, I'm going to appoint a committee. We were informed the other day, which she's been threatening to do for a while, that our solid waste director will be retiring at the end of the year. So I want to put together a committee to hire a new director, which would be Ron Knott, will be chairing it, Ray Statz, Gene Metler, Jim Guzzi, Ray Zerkowski, and Michael Reardon. So, is there any other business?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.